So if you just joined us, welcome to the British Business Excellence Awards webinar. You are in the right place. Thank you for joining us. We'll wait for people to come and join us and give them a couple of minutes. But if you have just joined, thank you very much indeed. If you have just joined us, thank you for coming and thank you for being here. This is the webinar for the British Business Excellence Awards entitled The Plight of the Female Founder. You are in the right place. We're just letting people join us and we'll be underway in a couple of minutes. So thank you for being here.
Here we are. Good morning, everybody. Hello, good morning and welcome. Welcome to the Lloyds Bank British Business Excellence Awards webinar this morning. The title is The Plight of the Female Founder. My name is Sarah Austin. I am the director and founder of the Lloyds Bank British Business Excellence Awards. I'm a female founder myself, and we have lots to talk about today. I'd like to introduce our lovely chair of the panel today, John Briggs, who I worked with for many years, and we'll be able to introduce our panel and we'll get our conversation going. John.
Sarah, thank you very much indeed. And if you have just joined us, welcome to our panel. We start, of course, by introducing our esteemed panelists. So I'm going to go around on the screen in the order that I have and say, Alex, welcome to our panel. Please let us know a little bit about yourself.
I'm the female founder of a company called West End Drinks, and about 10 years ago I created and launched a gin brand called the King of Soho. I've also done some judging for various different awards. One of them has been the Lloyds Bank Business Awards, and I am very pleased to be on the panel today.
And why are you passionate about this, Alex?
Well, I actually wrote an article in March about this very point. I started a project at the end of last year, and I was just wanting to find out what inspires and drives my fellow entrepreneurs, my fellow female entrepreneurs. And as part of doing that research, I was, because as you know, when you work, you very often you don't find the time to go and look at this particular subject. So I was doing it as a project. And I found an article which said that 1.3% of venture capital funding since 2017 across Europe only 1.3% had gone to female-founded companies. And I was actually quite shocked by that statistic. And when I sort of dug a little bit deeper, I discovered it was actually that the problem was much wider than that. It wasn't just venture capital funding across the whole Europe, it was funding full stop. So women tend not to ask for funding. The way that the questions are put to them about funding is biased. And it's actually quite a serious subject, because without funding, how do we operate our businesses? And yes, we can operate with a limited amount of funding, but that means that these businesses that women are running are continually being restrained and constrained, and that is obviously taking money and growth out of the economy. So at the end of the day, it's not just a female problem, it's a general problem overall. And I think one of the stats that we looked at was the fact that if women were actually funded correctly, it would add, I think it's 12 trillion, wasn't it, Sarah, to the actual global economy, which is quite a lot of money in my book. So this is not just a female problem. I think it's a problem across the board. But as I said, I'm passionate about it. I've been in business for a few years. I've got my own company. I hang out with my fellow entrepreneurs, whether they be female or otherwise. And I just think as an entrepreneur, it takes a lot of courage to do what we do. And as women, it would seem that the odds are actually stacked against us. You read about it, but, the fact is that, the statistics show that, it is true. It's not something that, when we find it harder, we're not making it up, are we? It is actually
Alex, you're raising so many questions already. We're already got so many things we want to ask. So I'm going to pause you there. Tracy, please give us a bit of background information and tell us about why this is important to you as well.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm the ex-CEO of global lingerie business, was Evedon. We then got subsequently bought by Wackle. So the brands were Fantasy, Freya and Alomi, so market leader in larger cup sizes, basically. And the business was, an incredibly successful business. We brought in some private equity investment. And so, this whole subject is incredibly important to me because that was key in us being able to grow the business and globalize the business in the way that we did. But I think since moving on and selling the business and now being involved with lots of other businesses, sitting on other boards and working with private equity, I think it's even more come to the fore as I see it, that women need help, female founders need help and support, and I enjoy getting involved with female-led businesses, backing them, angel investing in them, mentoring them, whatever that might be, and even getting involved with things like young enterprise, because I think it can never start too soon in terms of the education, both financial education to all people starting businesses, whether they're male or female, and just kind of, being an example, really, an example of what can be done with lots of hard work.
Thank you, Tracy. And Sarah, although this is partly an ownership thing in far as the event is concerned for you, but it is also about you as a businesswoman too. Why did you find, or what is the passion here for you, and tell us where you've come from, because your business is probably the shortest in terms of length that you have been on your own as an entrepreneur.
Yes. So my name's Sarah Austin. I'm the founder of the British Business Excellence Awards and Sarah Austin Events. I launched an events business when events were illegal, and with an 18-month-old baby. So I think I was slightly crazy, but it also might have been a stroke of genius also. It is incredibly important to me because I could not have done what I have done without the support of others, and in particular those within my networks, who are some around this table, to be able to empower others, which is what I try and do through the awards as well, to encourage those that what they are doing is award winning, is something that's incredibly important to me. I read the article that Alex wrote and I was like, my goodness, we have to talk about this in more detail. And I'm lucky enough to be able to work with our sponsors, Lloyds Bank and LDC, who also want to have the conversation. So my journey, I had worked for a big FTSE company prior to that. And I think in some ways, and I'll say this openly, I'd become somewhat institutionalized. You think but then you become an entrepreneur. And that's when everything changes. And I've learned so much in the last 2 years, in particular last year, that every different day throws a little challenge at you, or a big challenge, but it's just how you overcome it. And the biggest thing I think I've learned is knowing when to ask for support and knowing when to ask for help.
Thank you, Sarah. And Sophie, tell us about your background.
Hi guys, so I'm Sophie Isaacs. I work for LDC. For those of you that don't know, that's the private equity arm of Lloyds Bank. My role is to lead on origination across Yorkshire, so finding interesting businesses for us to potentially invest in. My background was, I spent the first 8 years of my career at Deloitte buying and selling businesses, and then moved on to BGF, where that's a venture capital investor, again, for those of you that don't know. So similar to LDC, but at the slightly smaller end of the scale. And this is a conversation that I really wanted to be involved in, because through my career of meeting interesting businesses, I would say less than 10%, probably 5% of the entrepreneurs, founders, CEOs that I meet are female. And it's unbelievable that that's still the case in 2022. So absolutely something that I'm keen to change.
Thank you, Sophie. So those are our panelists, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm just going to add that occasionally you'll see me moving my hand around the screen. It's because I'm working off an iPad and I'm consulting things. And if I'm looking slightly disinterested by looking off to the right here, it's because I've got another screen down there. So it's not that I'm not paying attention. It is simply that I'm trying to make sure we receive all the information we require. That also involves you, because there is an opportunity to ask questions. You'll see a Q&A panel if you have a look at your screen, and into that you can type your questions. We'll take as many as we possibly can, and I'll try and keep them relevant to the topic that we're on at the time, rather than inserting them in the middle of something and diverting the conversation, if you see what I mean. Alex, you raised an awful lot of questions there, even in your research into the article. I want to make this personal if I can, and now find out from you what you have experienced yourself when you have been looking for funding, when you've been looking to start businesses. What barriers, walls, difficulties, problems, misogynistic behavior have you discovered?
Well, I mean, you find misogynism everywhere, don't you? It sort of predates when you even start your career, doesn't it? I mean, we especially at the moment, I have a feeling we live in a slightly misogynistic society, but don't get me onto that topic. I think for myself, I actually funded my own business, and I was very lucky that my business partner also put in equity. So it's been self-funded. We never reached out for finance, but not everybody is in that position. Saying that, I probably do, since I started in business, I would say that, I'm like every woman probably on this panel, I've always been paid slightly less than the men. When you've taken a role and you're in the room, you're always the one who's expected to go and get the tea. You meet that attitude all the way down the line, and I don't really think it's improved. I mean, I thought we were further down the road, but recently I've been discovering, well, actually we're not. And I think, with the pandemic, if you've read all the different articles that have been written about the effect on women, we have suffered more. We've taken the brunt in the home. That traditional role has re-emerged in quite a suffocating way. Now, I think if you're a woman who wants to stay in the home, I will support you. But if you're someone who wants to go out and work and you want to set up your own enterprise and do your own initiative, I'll also support you. I don't think there's any right or wrong. We make personal choice. But I think if you do decide to do your own enterprise, I think that it is a battle. But as I said, since the pandemic, it has been quite a serious problem, which is why, when it comes to the funding side, I think it's in January 21, and the NatWest Group, they actually specifically allocated 1 billion towards female projects, female companies. Now, a bank like that is not going to allocate unless there is a problem and they feel that it needs addressing. Obviously, there's probably been some government sort of encouragement, But there is a problem. And as I said, it isn't just a female problem, it is an economic problem, because you are restraining growth from that particular sector within the economy by not funding. I myself, as I said, I've always worked really hard. You don't get anywhere by luck. Luck helps, but it's the hard work, it's your talents and skills that are very important. And I would say, I've probably actually been underfunded, because when I started my business, I probably didn't ask for enough money from my business partner. And because I worked so hard and I was so industrious, I've turned out to be one of the best investments he's made. So, and I'm not even joking about that. And it's because I did it on a shoestring, because that is what I was conditioned to do. And that was how I was conditioned to behave. And I think we need to get away from that, because one of the flip sides to that is you hit burnout sooner. And I think that's quite important, for women, especially, as I think burnout for anyone is serious, but for women, I think it hits a bit sooner. And everyone's so keen to blame other issues for it. It never occurs to them that it's because we are actually underfunded, overstressed, and overworked. It actually could be as simple as that. But let's find another reason and then create an industry out of that where we can be exploited. Why don't we?
Alex, a lot of the things, well, but open about it. And Alex, you're talking about a lot of things that are actually the differences in the way that men and women are treated by society, not necessarily by business, that then creates a situation where people are reticent to, as you say, ask for what they actually should ask for. To be as forward and demanding as they might. I mean, Tracy, is it just a societal problem, or is it a business problem?
I think a combination of both. I think, there are many societal issues which Alex has referred to, which I think are absolutely right. But I think in the business context, we certainly, I believe, don't know enough sometimes, and I go back to that whole kind of financial literacy and educational piece that I think maybe breeds a lack of confidence. Sometimes in female founders and female entrepreneurs, we kind of don't believe that we know enough or we're good enough, and therefore, we're probably more risk averse as well, and lack that confidence. We don't love networking. So probably, our pool of people, whether they're professional networks or mentors, are less than maybe men will have.
Does the type of business make a difference, though? Because Alex is dealing with the drinks business.
Yeah.
You were dealing with a business that was consistently selling mostly to women in the lingerie business.
Mostly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then Sarah is dealing with an events industry, which is actually that there are a very good division in terms of male-female within the events industry. It is pretty equal. But I'm intrigued as to whether the industry itself changes that viewpoint.
I don't know that it does. I don't know that it does. I think you'd be quite surprised. The larger lingerie businesses across the world are all run by men. Whilst you might get smaller, more entrepreneurial businesses started by women, once you get bigger, they are run by men. And we were very much in the minority as far as that was concerned. So once you put yourself on that global stage, you become one of very, very few. So, it's really quite interesting. You would expect that not to be the case, but actually it is. And I think that, when I sold the business and you then are part of an even bigger global business where you're a much smaller part of it and a female-led part of it, you become sort of a bit of a figurehead, to lots of the people that work within the organizations. It's quite interesting, but it's just because it's lingerie doesn't necessarily mean that they're all run by women. They're not.
Sarah, tell me a bit more. I could see you smiling when I talked about the division of male-female in the events industry. It's an industry we both know well, but am I inaccurate there?
I think if you were to look, if you look at the top 3 event companies globally, their boards are pretty pitiful when it comes to their ratios. And that is definitely, if you look at the industry, it is full of women. It is naturally, the events industry naturally attracts women because of its perceived glamour, and we all like to organize a lot of the time. We're very good at organizing things. So but actually, if you look, it is an industry of women but has a very male-dominated senior management level. So similar to what Tracy was saying, and that's something that I've been quite vocal about since I joined it at the age of 16. I couldn't believe it. And I think some of these, the smaller companies, like I said, the more entrepreneurial small businesses, when they become bigger, I think that there is a sort of leveling up that's happening because people are talking about it a little bit more. But I still think we are wading through treacle when it comes to the speed in which that should happen, because it's 2022, and like I said, these bigger companies need to work on their ratios. And I've always kind of had this question of, should it be them that's leading the way? Is it we have to learn from the top, or can SMEs and some of those types of businesses be doing more? Not necessarily in the events industry. I mean, just generally, when you look across British business in particular, and the work I do on the awards, I think there is a leveling up happening where people can say, you need to do more.
I'm going to add some statistics into this before I come to you, Sophie, if I may. Only 8 women employed as CEOs in the FTSE 100. 14% of women are in executive directorships. 38% of directorships as a whole are held by women. And add to that, the companies with at least one female director generated 3.5% higher compound excess as opposed to those that are run by male-only boards. The arguments are hard to argue against, aren't they, Sophie? Is this a problem about who occupies the boards of these companies? Is that where this originates from?
Possibly. I think it's difficult to say. From our perspective as investors, we are fundamentally looking at the business plan, and who is running it. They have to tick certain boxes. We're ultimately backing people, not just businesses. But we like those people to be themselves, ask the right questions, be ambitious, be honest. Whether they're male or female should be kind of less important. It's just that the challenge is that we're seeing less of the females coming through at that first hurdle. So it is a funnel point for us that if there were more female run businesses that were seeking investment, then absolutely we would be backing more of them.
And how do you encourage that? How do you encourage boards to make it fairer across the whole board so that there is an equality? There clearly isn't from those statistics that I've just read. It's clearly hugely weighted in the favour of men.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a long-term game, unfortunately. One of the points that Sarah made just there was that it's not about the big businesses. From my perspective, we should be targeting this at the grassroots. The SMEs need to be bringing forward female entrepreneurs, and these small businesses of today are going to be the FTSE 100s of the future. So I think it is starting small, and what we're doing today and just getting the message out there, and the education piece is really important.
So Alex, what do we do now to inspire and empower people who want to be female entrepreneurs and who want to be leading businesses at board level?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I came across when I was doing my research, because the project I did, I sat down with 4 fellow entrepreneurs and I asked everybody what inspired them. And everybody was inspired by something different. For some people, it was the passion. Some people, it was the objective in itself. Some people, it was the monetary side. But, we're all driven by something different. But I think when it comes to women, there seems to be a lack of mentorship. But there are women out there who will mentor, and I think we are, as women, we need to take responsibility ourselves for this situation. I mean, we should be supporting each other more, and I think there is a slight disconnect there, because I found that during my career, some of the women who should have supported me actually attacked me, and it wasn't necessary. But that I'm hoping we've moved away from that mindset. We should be pulling together to empower each other. We're not a threat to each other just because we're doing something similar. There's lots of men doing very similar things, and there's like a queue. There's like, they're standing in line, aren't they? And I think this goes back to what Tracy was saying. There's a lot of male clubs bit of, everyone slapping each other on the back, but we don't get that quite so much with women. And I don't know why that is. I think also as well, the thing that I've got a bit of a bugbear on, it's not about box ticking. There's too much box ticking goes on. Let's bring a woman on board and tick a box. And then what these companies fail to do, and I think this is actually key, because this is where the encouragement comes in. So you can hire a woman into a position to fill a quota. Anyone can do that, but it's educating, empowering, and making that person feel that they can do that job and giving them the tools that they need to do that job. And I think that is also where there is a disconnect. So you say, oh, we've got a female director. Well, what training have you given her? What tools have you given her? How are you making it easier for your female hire? Because for the men it's easier, they all go down the pub, don't they? But we're not quite in. I mean, it's still, I think there's still, society is not as integrated as we like to think, or as when we watch Netflix, it's not like that. It's not real, but I think I think education is very important. So it's about empowering when people are given the jobs, not just ticking the boxes. And I also think women should be having more discussions. We should be meeting more amongst ourselves, and we should be mentoring and supporting each other. And I also think, one more quick point. When we set up our own businesses, it's up to us to engineer a culture with our own companies. And that's also very important. And it's something that everyone forgets. Empower the women in your companies. Make sure that those external third parties are actually treating them with the respect that they should be given because of the jobs they do. And that is also very important. And I'm very hot on that with my female employees. I will not let any third party dish them, because it's just not acceptable. Yeah, and you get it.
Let's come back to the how you inspire people as well. And I also want to talk about what you do for those people who are coming out of education, so that they feel they have the confidence to be able to go, I'm starting my own business and I'm going to make it a success. Sarah, just go back to the experiences that you've had in the last 24, 36 months, from transitioning from being an employee from a major corporation to actually taking on board all of this yourself. Have you experienced those same things that what Alex was talking about in terms of support from other female workers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think regardless of male or female, being an entrepreneur can be quite a lonely place at times. So it's about, like I said at the beginning, what I've learned so much is just knowing when to have those conversations and knowing when to ask for help. I think that, for me, what I really struggle with as a female entrepreneur is the balance of life. Because I also have a very demanding 2-year-old, and those, the conversations that I ensure that I have within my business, albeit very small, is that the members of my team, the female members of the team, we're all mothers, we're all working mothers. So what comes first is that is what, our sons come first. We've both got little boys, and then our health. Because I've also experienced a burnout twice since starting my business. I'm a type 1 diabetic. I've been in hospital twice in the last 12 months. So you have to know, and that's something that I've learned the hard way. You have to know when to take a step back and reach out to support from others. And remember that there are people who will help you, who you wouldn't necessarily think, or you have to pay them to. People are there to support you. You just have to seek them out. And it really does, when you go on the journey, you'll find those people. And finally, yes, leading back to that hard work element, you don't get, and if it's easy to get there, it's not really worth doing. So that's something that I've learned. You really do reap the rewards. And generally, for me as an awards business, when we come to the night of the awards, that's when I sit back and I look at all these other people who are incredibly happy to receive their awards, and I think, oh right, this is why I do it. This is all hard work, sleepless nights, typing on my laptop with my little boy sleeping next to me at 1 o'clock in the morning. But it's not like that all the time. But those challenging moments, they will pay off.
Tracy, I know that as far as you're concerned, the the level of success. You tripled the turnover of your lingerie business in 13 years. If you look at those, it doesn't sound like you had much problem in raising investment. Does that hide the truth, I suppose, is what I'm asking?
Yeah, I suppose a little bit. I mean, if I'm honest, no, we didn't. No, we didn't have a huge amount of issues raising investment. At the time that we chose to go out, you know, the business was very much on an upwards trajectory, you know, doing very well. We had a great message, and we were in a niche market. You know, we were making products that nobody else was making. So yeah, it was a great story, but I can't pretend that, you know, I did it alone, because I didn't. You know, I had a fantastic chairman. We brought in a great CFO, and they kind of filled the gaps that I had. You know, going back again to the whole financial piece, that was never my strength at all. You know, my strength was branding and product and sales. And so I needed other people. And I never marketed the business as being female-led. We were very much about our brands. It was never about me. It was never about, you know, what I was trying to do. It was about, these are our brands, they're front and center, and these are the brands that are doing the best job. And I think that helped us, actually. But when we did start meeting with private equity businesses, we certainly didn't meet with a female investment director. You know, they were all men. And it was the first time I'd ever done that. And you know, did
you feel at a disadvantage because of that?
A little bit, yeah. If I'm honest, and because there's all these people around me who can all talk, you know, very eloquently about the financials of the business and what we were taking on, and there was me, and I was talking about bras, you know. So yeah, I guess I did feel that the guys around me really helped and supported me through that, and I needed that, you know, I did. And obviously I learned so much more over the years, but you know, then I go to when I sold the business in 2012. You know, we had a fabulous trade offer, and it was the right thing to do, and it was the best thing for the business, but nobody really talked to me about what my options might be and who might back me to take the business on the next phase. So, you know, I think back to all of that, and I think now when I talk and work with other people, that it's so key to understand all of your options at any point, and take as much advice as you possibly can. And I do that with as many people as approach me and want to talk to me about it, because I just think it's so key that we just get that level of information to people, to women, so that they understand that there are people out there that will help.
We touched a little bit on the subject of tokenism, in inverted commas, the idea that, you know, we can say, look, we have a female board member, we've ticked that box. Sophie, how do we avoid this situation? How do we avoid the situation where somebody goes, well, look, this is the demand we can hear society and other people putting on the company that we need to have more female members on the board. So look, we've done it. Yeah. But it doesn't actually, that's not the thing that changes the way the company interacts and works, or indeed how successful it is it?
No, absolutely. And just to clarify, you know, I have targets around how many businesses we meet. I don't have any targets around, you know, what split of male versus female they are. So I don't say that, I wouldn't say there's tokenism from that perspective. It's more just a personal passion for me to meet female entrepreneurs and business owners. But it is a challenge. Ultimately, we are a financially driven business, and so the criteria and metrics for businesses that we invest in are the same regardless of whether you're a male or a female. You know, it's not a case that we would look at a loss-making business just because it was female owned. So like I said before, I think that the starting point for me is about there being more female entrepreneurs out there, but also having people such as me within private equity businesses, because clearly there is an unconscious bias, as Tracy's touched on before, where I think that female entrepreneurs probably feel a little bit more comfortable speaking to a female investor. So that's also something that I'm really keen to do is bring more women through private equity and into the investment world, so that more conversations can be started with female entrepreneurs. But no, I haven't experienced tokenism as such, but I can only speak from my personal perspective.
Anybody else aware of that, and indeed have ideas how you get past that because of the political correctness? Am I using the wrong phrase there? There's an element of that here, isn't there, Alex?
Well, I mean, I must admit, I'm not very keen on doing things for the sake of political correctness. I think that,
of course,
still from a business perspective, you should be doing things. I always say to people, the business is an entity in its own right, and the way you operate it you have to be doing for what is best for the business, not for yourself, not for any political views you might have. I mean, that they are outside the scope of that enterprise. But certainly, I mean, across Europe, I believe in Germany they have to fill quotas. This is not. It's discussed in the UK. There are various organisations that encourage that and have been set up to push that particular viewpoint forward. But it's certainly not one that I buy into. And I think, getting back to what Sophie was saying, I mean, it has been shown that, if the finance person is a woman, they are more likely to listen to you if you are a female entrepreneur. And that's actually a statistic. It's not something that we've just pulled out of the air. I think as a woman, I'm comfortable talking to anybody. But saying that, I think that's my personality. And also, I've been doing this for a while now. I think back to me 20 years ago, I didn't have the confidence I have now. And, I maybe put up with things that I shouldn't have done. And that came back to what Tracy was saying when she was selling her business. Nobody said to her, well, actually, Tracy, you can take it on to the next stage yourself. You don't need these guys. You don't need to be taken over by a big corporate entity. And I think as an entrepreneur, and this applies to men and women, I think we don't always sit very comfortably with the big corporate entities that come in to buy up our ventures. It's not something that sits well with us. I mean, the whole thing about an entrepreneur is, we're entrepreneurial. We're a little bit crazy at times. We love the journey as much as the end goal. And as I said, the end goal is not necessarily that pot of gold. The end goal is creating a business and touching people's lives and adding value to society. It's more complex,
I'm going to add a reminder as well of the question and answer box. If you wish to pose a question yourself to our esteemed panelists here, you have until well, probably about 5 to 12, because 12 o'clock is our cutoff point. We're only here for the hour. One of the statistics that I read in the process of preparing for this idea that women give back more than male counterparts, and the suggestion being they know how hard it is to raise the capital because they generally start with half as much as a male entrepreneur might do, but they're far more willing to assist and give back. Is that your experience, Tracy?
Yeah, I think that's very true. Alex said earlier about the fact that her business was probably underfunded, and I think it comes back to probably this risk averseness that we have. I certainly know that we brought in some funding. Could we have done even more if we brought in more? Yes, probably. But I do think that we are protective about what we do. We care deeply about what we do, and I think as a consequence of that, we probably also think very carefully about our teams and all of the value that we're creating, and therefore we don't want to put that at risk. And I know I speak to a lot of people nowadays who say that to me as well, and aren't maybe sure about going with private equity funding because they kind of say yes, but I'm putting debt into the business. I've never had debt, and that a lot of those issues can just come from the fact that we're just not used to it. We're just not used to it. We are more risk averse, and it's just about having that confidence just to maybe take a slightly bigger step.
Sarah, where did your starting capital come from? Was it purely yourself, or did you have other investors too?
I actually, because of my business model, my startup costs were very small, so I self-funded. Thinking about it now, it didn't really occur to me to go elsewhere for it, because I hadn't ever been thought to think that way. It's because I was conditioned of what I'd gone through before. So, and I think it, just leading back to what Tracy was saying, it does come back down to confidence and how risk averse you are. For me, setting up the business, you know, I was terrified at the time, but something in me, there was a fire in me to do it. And it was my partner and people like yourself, John, who gave me that, you know, boost to actually step out of my comfort zone to do it. But it really, you know, if I look across my career, there are so many times that I wish I'd spoken up a little bit more, but I just didn't have the confidence because I was like, oh, I don't know, you know, you didn't want to rock the boat, particularly in a corporate environment. Now with the wisdom and time, and most of it learned in the last year, if I'm honest, there's no way that I would shut up in some of those uncomfortable meetings. And I wish I could go back and say my piece, and someday I might, but it's that's what I then put my energy into, ensuring that I empower others.
Mm-hmm.
So let's turn our attention now to what can be done moving forward to change this situation. And Alex, you mentioned it, and I said I wanted to come back to it, this idea of educating people before they leave school that these opportunities exist, that they can go into business for themselves. What are we doing right there? What are we doing wrong? How do we make that clearer?
Well, I don't think it's about educating about going into business. I think it's just about education in general, you know, just educating everybody so we have a more equal society. It's not just about business. I think if we narrow it down to business, I don't think you can give a course on being an entrepreneur. I think that's something that's intrinsic within you. What you can do is make sure that everybody has an equal opportunity to learn maths. I mean, something as simple as that, you know, adding up kind of comes in quite, you know, it's important, you know, getting the calculator out. But it's like going back to schools, making sure that, you know, there's no division of the sexes, and that people are confident and sort of, you know, treated the same way. And it's not just about men and women. I mean, there's all this society now is so much more complex. So it's about equality in the classrooms. It's about equality getting into university. It's never going. Society is never going to be perfect, but we can try our best, and it's making sure that people are moving forward on merit, and that people who do have the skills and the talent, we're developing that. And again, that's for everybody's benefit. You know, not just for women. I mean, this isn't. I think, you know, there is a tendency to sort of make it a gender thing. Well, this is actually a society thing, you know, and it's what we can do for the good of everybody. But certainly, I think education is important, and it's educating. I mean, you know, think about it with women. We only got the vote in 1918. Yeah, I mean, you asked me what the root cause was, and I was actually thinking about this morning when I was having my coffee, and I thought, well, it goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. You know, we came from his rib, didn't we? It was something. I mean, that's the attitude in society we've been living with over the centuries. And I'm not talking about religion here. I'm just talking about the fact that that was the concept we all started with. And you know, we've come a long way since then, but it seems to have slowed down. It seems to have gone back slightly, and I think, as I said, that is shown by, you know, like HSBC have launched £1 billion fund. I mentioned the NatWest group earlier. Now HSBC launched a fund, I think it was last month, and it's a global fund, and they've made 1 billion available and that was in response to the way women have suffered and during the pandemic, and how we have suffered more than on the gender, if we are separating by gender, than men. So they've launched this fund. But again, 1 billion, it might sound a lot, but when you put it globally, it's not that much money, is it? I mean, do you see what I mean? It's not, in the grand scheme of things, it's actually not a lot if you spread it across the globe, which is what they've done. So, I mean,
but the other side of this, Alex, the other side of this, Alex, is it's all very well making the funding available, but you've got to have people who want to say, can I have some of that, please?
Well, I think women do, and I've read this, oh, women don't send. Well, actually, no, I'm going to disagree with that, because, you know, there's a tone deafness to society. And I was reading an article the other day, and it was about they sort of examined the questions that men are asked when they go to ask for funding, and women. And for men, it's, you know, how are you going to capitalize this? And it's all the plans or whatever. With a woman, it's like, well, how are you going to break even, my dear? I mean, it's a completely different approach. And, you know, as a woman, I asked, and I have come across this tone deafness. And again, that comes back to education. So you're educating men, you know, just everybody has to, it's about coming back to equality, you know, how it's achieving equality of sound, of voice. So, and it's making sure that we're not asked female questions when we go for the funding. And I think women do ask, but I think also, you know, if you get to a certain point and you're not getting help, you're not going to put your application in for the funding because you haven't got that help or education to do a business plan. Because when you've gone to ask, you've gone to the basic sort of business forums or whatever at council level, they've thought, oh, well, you're a woman, here's a calculator, break even. I mean that sort of, I mean, it's a circle. So I'm going to disagree with you. Women do ask, women do try, but if you're hitting a brick wall at some point, you're going to step back and you're going to say, well, let's just focus on what I'm doing around me, and I will make the most out of what I have myself to push myself forward.
Sophie, what do we need to do to encourage people who are to ask more often? I mean, I'm assuming none of those things, of course, apply to how you approach female entrepreneurs, because part of your job is to actually go out and search for female entrepreneurs. It's one of the activities you engage in. But in terms of getting people to feel free to access the money that is now clearly becoming available, even though it isn't enough, are we doing enough?
First of all, I absolutely agree with everything Alex has just said there, and no, we're definitely not doing enough. I think, unfortunately, as everyone on this panel has touched upon, it is a societal problem. I think men traditionally have the networks of people around them that would educate them around investment, that would promote them. I even notice it, for example, in my personal life. I will go to a social event, maybe a wedding, for example, and my husband will be talking to the person next to him about business, and the women are typically talking about something else, and that really, really needs to change. You know, I think that women should be helping women and sat around the dinner table talking about how we can help each other in business on a Saturday night in the same way that men would. I think that surrounding yourself with the right group of people, as we've got on this panel, is hugely important. I think having female advisors, female angel investors, whatever that might be, is really necessary to be able to bring those entrepreneurs through. But yeah, I think, like I say, it's a long-term game, but being part of networks such as this and promoting each other and shouting about each other is all we can do, really. But I do feel that we've got a long way to go, but I do feel positive about the future. You know, in my career, I've already seen big changes in the past 10 years or so. It's not been enough, but it's getting better. So have you got an example you can share with us from your portfolio of a female entrepreneur who's come to you and created something amazing? Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, we've got Lisa Lemieux. So it's the horse riding products business. So that was a business that LDC invested in 2021, and that is the market leading equestrian brand founded by Lisa in 2004. So that business achieved 22 million of revenue last year, and it's on track to increase that by about 50% this year. So fantastic revenue growth, and that's something that we've invested in recently. And I think one thing that's really positive from my perspective is once we have those really positive case studies within our portfolio, it's then being able to leverage on those and say to other female entrepreneurs, you know, this is what we've done with people previously. And often, even before we make an investment, while we're speaking to an entrepreneur about potentially backing them, we're keen to facilitate that conversation. So putting forward a potential investment and linking them up with people who've already invested in and getting the conversation going, because I can sit here as part of LDC and say, these are all the great things we're going to do for you and your business, but getting those founders to be able to speak to each other and pass that message about their experience is really important.
Did Lisa come to you, or did you go and find her?
So this wasn't one that came to me personally, but yes, one of my colleagues approached her, and often these conversations are going for, many years in advance of the investment actually happening. So it's not about reaching out and trying to do the hard sell. That's certainly not the way that I approach this role personally. It's just starting conversations, starting the education, and then many years down the line, in some cases, it actually becomes a tangible investment opportunity for LDC.
Sophie, thank you. So as we come towards the end of our conversation, I'd like to speak to all of the panelists and ask them the same question, which is, what was the best piece of advice that you got that allowed you to become or achieve the position you have? The best piece of advice as a female entrepreneur that you received? Tracy.
Oh, goodness. I don't know, it's really interesting. I can quite honestly say, before I took initial investment, I didn't get any advice. I think it was very much that, we agreed as a team that it was the right thing to do. I think as my career then went on, and as I've continued to work with lots of other people and gain lots of different experience, then I think you pick up snippets of advice along the way. But yeah, I can quite honestly say in the very beginning I didn't, and I guess my mantra just became that the proof was in the results, really, and that that's something that I continue to believe with everybody that I work with and with every entrepreneur that I meet. If you can prove it in the results, it doesn't matter what gender you are, what color you are, it really doesn't matter. It's just prove it in what you do and what you achieve.
And what would be your best piece of advice to a female entrepreneur who is listening or watching this right now?
And just use people, use people, make contacts, use the fabulous network of females that are out there, because they are out there. There's a huge amount of groups that were not around when I first started in business that are now. Huge amount of angel investors. There's so many more women now in private equity than there were 20 years ago. So, just talk to people and reference people always, and check out that people and businesses and investors are what they say they are. If you do that, it can be very fruitful.
Somebody calling already asking for investment and advice, I can hear. Alex, best piece of advice you were given?
Oh, I'm a bit like Tracy. I mean, I didn't get any advice directly. I mean, my background is a little bit different because my mother was an entrepreneur, and I come from quite a long line of female entrepreneurs who going out there, who were in business before they, when it wasn't acceptable. So I mean, that's a bit of a hard one for me. But I think one, maybe it was probably, the advice wasn't directed at me, but I was in the room at the time when we were just discussing setting up the gin, and someone just turned around and said, well, Alex can do it. And that's how I ended up running and driving the company, because a group of guys said, well, Alex can do it. So I don't know. And sometimes I think, yes, I can do it. And I think it's that self-belief, isn't it? So I maybe indirectly was given some good advice, because I think we have to start with self-belief. I mean, you can believe in the business you're building, you can believe in your dreams, the projects, but that all starts, in order to execute, implement, and actually make that reality, I think it starts with self-belief. So maybe the advice, Alex can do it, although it was said above my head, round me, and all the rest of it, was probably one of the best bits of advice that I was given, and that actually came to me by a group of men.
And what would you advise others?
Not the group of women. So it's but saying that, I'm lucky to have met people like Sarah and I know some great female entrepreneurs, and we do all empower each other. So, but that initial bit of advice at the time just came from a group of guys. Oh, don't worry, Alex can do it. And it was their confidence in me probably. And I sat there and thought, yeah, I can. Because up until that point, I'd always, whilst I've been, I had that entrepreneurial spirit. I spent a long time working for other people, but that I learned a lot of skills. And I learned how I didn't want my business to look. I learned about business culture I didn't want in my company. So it's all been very useful.
And what would you advise a female entrepreneur, a prospective female entrepreneur? What would you tell them?
Well, I would say, just remember you when you are an entrepreneur, you start with believing in yourself. You believe in the business that you're setting up, the enterprise you're setting up. And also remember, you write your own script. I mean, that's the beauty of being an entrepreneur. And yeah, determination, tenacity, they really are key, because, as Sarah says, we all have personal lives. We have responsibilities outside of the business. We have to juggle and balance. And it's that tenacity to sit there with a laptop at 1 o'clock in the morning, that determination to get that work finished, because it's hard work. I mean, don't think being an entrepreneur is an easy route. It's not particularly glamorous. It's a lot of hard work. I remember in the early days, as I said, because I was slightly underfunded, I worked myself into the ground. I used to fall asleep on people's couches. We've
all been there.
Do you want a coffee? Right. Snoring in the corner. And you know what I mean? And it's and I go, oh, she's off again. Just give her a nudge. Give her 5 minutes. She's tired, bless her. But that's the thing. We write our own script. And with you're an entrepreneur, the business can be the size you determine it to be. And there is no rights and wrongs on that. But if you want a big business, go out and ask for the financing. That's what I'm saying. If you want a small business, you're happy with where you're at. Well, that, as far as I'm concerned, is excellent too. Because we're all generating and contributing to society and our friends and our families and the people around us. So just go for it. Whatever size or whatever you want, go for it. And if you want something, ask. Because if you don't ask, you don't get.
Well, I want to ask Sarah about her experiences of being a female entrepreneur, and indeed the best piece of advice you received.
I think that, well, John, you'll know this as well. Working in the world of corporate awards ceremonies for the last 15 years, you get to meet some really inspirational speakers. And I've been so lucky. I've met so many incredible people. But I remember it was actually in 2019, and before I'd launched my business. But I think at a certain event, I'd already given the impression that I was running it anyway, and I had my own business. And Sarah Davies we sat next to each other at the table, and she was giving me lots of advice, which was lovely. And she ultimately was just said, I'm here if you need me, and always be true to yourself. So it leads back to that self-belief. And God, that struck with me. My little boy, he was only 3 months old at the time. And I was just, she was so honest about her balance of life as well. And then I think, so that's something that I particularly remember as a piece of advice. And that's something that I then now give on to others. And one thing that I also always remember is that you're being watched. Because by younger women. There's a little girl she's the daughter of one of my judges, and she wrote a book, she's only 13, about women in media, and she managed to interview all these women, and bless her, she put me in there as well. And it just sort of, I was up against Joanna Lumley, who's in there as well, and we all gave these quotes to her about what she can do. And ultimately, similarly to what we're all saying here, it's about self-belief. And also, the quote that went on the front cover is, women can do incredible things, they just need to be listened to. So I think, it's about what Alex said as well, ask for help when you need it. If you want to grow your business, you'll need to ask for help. Just believe in yourself. I need to take my own advice most of the time.
I think we all do. And that is the point where we must close down proceedings and say thank you to everyone who's joined us here on the panel, and thank you for all your words of wisdom to Sarah, to Tracy, to Sophie, and to Alex. And we at this point look forward to the awards themselves. So Sarah, I'll allow you to tell us a bit more about those, and you can close the proceedings for us, please.
Yes, and just to extend that thank you to everybody for your time today and your insight. It's been, this has been the best hour, and what a brilliant way to start my week. So the Lloyds Bank British Business Excellence Awards are open for entries. We have the UK's largest business awards programme, and we have a category that should suit every business, from new entrepreneur of the year to entrepreneur of the year, SME Business of the Year, and also this year we've launched the Diversity Champion of the Year, which I think is also quite applicable for today's conversation. So we're here. This is also a level of business support through entering the awards. We have partners like LDC, Lloyds Bank, King's Business School, and business in the community. If you go to britishbusinessexcellenceawards.co.uk, you'll be able to see all of the categories and criteria. And once you if you enter into the programme, you become part of the community. So we very much encourage that. And I hope that everyone can see how much passion I put into it to ensure that we are empowering businesses, male, female, small, big. There is a place for you in the awards.
Fantastic. We look forward to seeing us. When the date, remind us of the date.
Oh, yeah, the 8th of November, the event itself, in the Grosvenor House Hotel on Park Lane in London. That's the main award ceremonies, but entries are open at the moment and they will close on the 17th of June. So please start now. Thank you so much.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Our time is up and we look forward to seeing you all there in November.
Thank you.